election of Donald Trump, but that's what you even heard from our friends. That's how it goes. All right, Jim Talent. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Jamie.
How are you?
I'm fine. I don't blame Hayward's family. I'm telling you, those staff jobs, they just eat you alive in the White House.
Yeah.
I mean, it is 24/7. And Hayward was right to check with his family to see how they felt about it because, I mean, they're important jobs and we need good people, but you have to understand going in what it entails. It's very, very difficult.
I heard you on Brian Kilmeade the other day.
Yes. Evidently, I let a word escape my lips that I don't normally. I mean, I've used that expression before. I've used it on a really popular St. Louis show, but normally I don't say those kinds of things. So,
well, it was a little bit of a potty mouth moment for you. I mean,
I know McConnell is working hard for him. We'll see.
Thanks a lot, Senator Jim Talent, former senator from Missouri. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Now
Tell him I think
American
he's a son of a
Enterprise Institute,
bitch.
186.
You know, Jamie, my wife called me up afterwards, and she said, "Well, who were you calling a son of a bitch?" I said, I don't think I used that on the Kilmeade show. I said, that as you know, Brenda, I said that word has come out of my mouth, but it's not on such a regular occasion that I don't remember doing it. It's not like I use that expression every other sentence I utter. And I said, I don't know, maybe somebody in the studio did. And then the mystery was cleared up.
Yes, it was after a great deal of discussion here at the radio station, and of course Jeff Allen, who is my boss. After that all happened, and of course Pippi and I, who basically are not good for each other, apparently, plotted this out, and then of course I got about 10:20 in the morning. I got a text from Jeff Allen, who, of course, was busy with a brand new grandbaby, but then had to deal with this. And the two words that he texted me were, "Call me." So, then
I came to understand yesterday that a certain St. Louis personality, an imp, actually inserted that in there. I want you to know I was not offended at all.
Oh, I know.
I thought it was funny.
Well, we just had to make sure.
I understand Kilmeade. I mean, this is a radio thing, so you and Kilmeade sorted it out, I'm sure. So,
we actually did, and we sorted it out not only on the air with Brian, who had called in, but then subsequently I shared the whole drama with Chris Wallace, and then subsequent to that, Chris Wallace then appears on Kilmeade's show right after my show, and here's how that went down.
Oh, incidentally, are you mad at Jamie Allman?
No,
because I was talking to Jamie Allman, and he said that he's on opposite you. Bosch is on for 1 hour, your last hour.
Well, we did have to get some clarification. Because Jamie Ullman played something after my interview with Senator Jim Talent.
Yes.
And Jim Talent evidently used an expletive, and they played it, and they had no idea.
He used it in a completely separate. And Jamie brought this up, and he said that he had to apologize to his general manager, and he was like in trouble. He sounded quite sheepish about it.
He's a great guy, and I forgive him. He's also on television,
I do know that.
Yeah. So
you're on the lesser medium, too. That's what I think is called good radio, isn't it? I mean, it's an interesting byplay.
Well, and actually, it does. I mean, obviously, we lucked out because, first of all, I waited to play it because I wanted to make sure that little drop. I sat there with my finger on the button and made sure I did it at a time that there was clearly no reference to anybody, including President Trump or General Mattis, or so I wanted to make sure it was very clear that there was nobody could take away that you were referencing a particular person. So I didn't want to drop it in then. And but generally, just as an inside piece of info for you, is that we have learned, it's just once again reinforced this idea that if you have second thoughts about something, it's probably not something you want to do.
That's. I refer to that as an idea that's half-baked and needs to go back in the oven for a while longer. But I mean, it's good radio. If you don't, you got to keep trying things on a show like yours, Jamie. I'm just thinking, listening to the lead-in and the way you play clips and everything, and I've thought about this before. The enormous preparation it takes and the effort it takes to keep a show like yours fresh when you're on, virtually every day.
Yes.
It takes a lot of ingenuity. I mean, I admire people able to do it. You have a good team and a great show. And I just said to Brenda, I said, well, I hope, I don't know what happened, but I had a good interview with Brian. I didn't call him a name.
Well, it's funny is one person came to your defense on Twitter and said, knowing Jim Talent is probably the one time in his life that he is actually cussed, and you have suddenly immortalized it. And poor Jim, they said. So anyway, I'm just giving you trouble.
A little, but I'm old school, so I try to be careful. I just said it on your show again, which is probably a mistake because there are people listening that might be offended, and if they are, I apologize. I try to be very careful not to say things that in certain company, I just think it's important to be respectful of people.
Well,
times have changed a little, right?
Well, just so people know, too, that actual little soundbite was in the context of your awesome story that actually involved Russia, which is why I thought it was perfect, because you were talking about General Patton. Here's you.
Oh, you've seen the movie Patton? At the end of that movie where they're having that party with the Russians and they're going to drink a toast, and Patton says, tell him I think he's a son of a bitch. Pardon me, I shouldn't say that in a family show. And the interpreter interprets it that way, and the Russian guy comes back and says, well, you're a SOB too. And Patton says, okay, one SOB to another, I'll drink to that. And that's how you deal with the Russians.
Yeah, right? So it was perfect, because it was in that context. It wasn't even you, referring to anybody, really. You were just telling us a story, so I thought it was perfect.
From a famous movie, which I'm sure many, many people in your audience have seen, and the point is a good one. I mean, the Russians have to respect you before they'll deal with you in anything like an honest basis. And then you can deal with them where your interests coincide with them. And that's the problem now, is that the way they're defining their interests in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, is adversarial to ours. That's the problem. Another expression I use about them is I do trust. And people say, "Do you trust them?" I said, "I trust them to pursue their own interests." Okay, so you have to step back and ask yourself what's at stake, and is there any real room for working together? For years after the fall of the Soviet Union, we did work with the Russians, and they were honest about it in trying to find nuclear material that in the confusion following the fall of the Soviet Union, they have lost some control over. And it was the loose nuke policy. It was trying to find the loose nukes, and they worked with us in good faith. So it's possible. But again, you have to have a coinciding of interests. And that's what I think the administration is going to explore. And I have a fair level of confidence that they'll do a good job with it. Although, obviously, this Flynn episode is a bump in the road for him.
Yeah, I would think so. And as you pointed out at the very beginning of this interview, people don't realize that this is really, the NSA director job is really a staff job. I mean, obviously it's an important job, but people are acting like this is the Secretary of State. And I'm not demeaning General Flynn or the position at all. I'm just saying it really is kind of a staff job. Now, let me ask you something.
Staff job. Go ahead, ask your question, but I'm trying to finish a column when I discussing that. But go ahead, ask your question.
Well, yeah, because that was something that really is important to note, because they're acting like the resignation was that it was like a vice president resignation, and it just simply wasn't.
Yeah, that's true, and there's several threads here. One which a lot of people have written about is what's the intelligence community, the IC as it's called. What are they doing? Leaking. First of all, taping these conversations, okay, it was going to involve the Russian ambassador, then leaking them. That's one thread to this, and that's a problem. Another is, and Krauthammer wrote a column about this. This is a cover-up in search of a crime. In other words, when I first read about it, I thought, well, I don't care if Flynn talks about sanctions with them. In fact, I would expect that he would. It's one of the issues between the two countries. So what was all the, why was everybody so worried about whether he was talking about that? And then the third thing, and I think this contributed to it, is was that job the right fit for Mike Flynn from the beginning? And this is not a slap at him. He's a leader. He's not really a staff guy.
Right.
See? And I think that contributed to this in part, just whether it was the right fit for him. And I suspect that the president, and I don't know, and I haven't talked to anybody, but I suspect that they had begun to wonder about that pretty quickly, and there was a lot of speculation on that. So they'll get somebody good to replace him, and the names I've seen I like, and they'll get somebody good.
Well, and since you just said that they need a leader, I mean, I would consider you to be a leader. But Brian, when he talked to you, was curious enough after having a discussion with you. I don't know how often you talked to him or how often you've been on his show. Was that the first time you've ever been on his show?
It was. I'd really gone on. It was fine talking about Flynn, but I'd really gone on to talk about Andy Puzner because at the time, we thought he was going to have his hearing, and Andy is an old friend of mine, and I was trying to help him. And then the Flynn story broke, and so Brian went in that direction for most of the interview. But it was really, when we lined it up, we thought it was going to be about Andy Puzner's nomination. So we ended up talking about Flynn.
Well, but as he was talking to you, it became he clearly had his curiosity piqued, because obviously anytime anybody would have, certainly at a national level, have a conversation with you, it suddenly occurred to him, like, what about you? Would you take a job in the Trump administration? Because I guarantee you, after many of these conversations you've had here on the radio show here, I always get email from people going, why isn't Jim Talent in the Trump administration?
Well, yeah, I would be interested. And, my area of particular interest is the Pentagon and the armed forces. And so I think President Trump really wants to rebuild the military. I think that's a core instinct of his. If you stop and think about it for a second, does Donald Trump want America to be strong in its dealings with other nations? And, the answer to that, you're going to say just viscerally, yeah, he wants that. So I think that, and he has an outstanding defense plan. They're working on refining it. That's the area I'd like to go in, rather than inside the White House in a staff job. Those are very important and informally very powerful, because your proximity to the president,
right,
means that you have a lot of influence. You have to be careful how you exercise it. But so I like to do something in the defense area. There's still several posts available, and it's going to take them a while to fill it. But that's a choice they have to make, and those depend a lot. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and when you put in one piece, that affects the other pieces that you're going to put in. So they're working their way through it.
All right. Well, I've taken a lot of time with you, and I appreciate the time you've taken with us. And speaking of the NSA, I know you knew Brian was possibly going to appear on the show, and the NSA recorded a telephone conversation between you and Brian where you were suggesting that Brian talk to me on the air, and you said this.
Tell him I think he's a son of a bitch.
So, about me, so... That was an NSA recording.
Well, and I'm outed now, Jamie. Yeah. My real opinion of you after all these years.
Hey, listen, buddy, thanks so much for the time. Have a great weekend, and thanks for being such a terrific sport, my friend.